the second one, the Back to the Future 2. Okay. I love the movies. I really do. The first one, the second one were awesome. Third one, okay. But anyway, the first and the second were great. Loved them. But there is this scene where, and just in case you don't know, kind of set the stage a little bit, Biff, sometime here in present day, he runs across this book. And this book has all the sports stats from like 1950 to 2000. Who wins every game and all of this. And so he finds it, and he comes up with this great plan. And so he hops in the time-traveling DeLorean, and he goes back to the 50s, and he gives this book to his younger self, which is young Biff, okay? And basically tells him, if you will bet using this book, I mean, this is worth millions. And Biff is not the brightest bulb in the box. And so he really he's kind of doesn't know what that means. And so old Biff explains it to him. And the way that he proves it to him, he says, here, he goes, this book will tell you what's going to happen in the future when it comes to sports. And so he turns on the radio, and there's a football game that's being played live right then. And so old Biff says, the final score is going to be, and he tells him what the final score is going to be. And so then they sit there, for a second, and sure enough, one team kicks a field goal, at the last second, and the score ends up exactly the same. And he's like, how did you know that? And he's like, I told you this book. So, bet on it, use it. But, you think about it, that would be pretty convincing proof. I mean, we have people that come around, they try to tell us what the future is going to hold. They tell us what's going to happen tomorrow. Can you say weatherman? And how's that working? But no, imagine for a second that somebody were to come up to you and say, hey, I can tell the future. We wouldn't believe them. And then they'd say, okay, hold on. I'm going to prove it to you. And so they would give you the numbers for the Powerball lottery that is going to win on Wednesday night. And then come to find out, on Wednesday night, you're watching TV, and sure enough, the numbers are exactly what they say. Okay? And there was no way they could have cheated. There was no, they couldn't have known it ahead of time or affected the outcome or anything else. It's just, they knew what was going to happen. So what would you do at that point? I think that you would probably say, okay, you need to give me the numbers for Saturday, or tell me something else that's going to happen, right? Because they said something was going to happen, and then it did happen exactly as they said it was going to happen, right? So, I mean, that's great proof that they knew what was going to happen in the future, correct? Okay. So, the reason I say that, and you're kind of like, I have no clue what this has to do with Jesus, but the Bible in many ways is full of I think, many of the same proofs, okay? Not that, understand me, this is not in any way saying that God has to prove himself to us. But the Bible that I'm holding in my hand, the Bible that you have sitting on your lap or on your phone or your iPad or whatever, this book is filled with all kinds of proofs. It contains scientific information that there is no way that the people who recorded it could know or they didn't know at the time, okay, which has now been proven true. There we find historical and archaeological statements that are made that we are discovering to this day to be true, even though nobody had any clue that things would go that direction. And so that adds to the veracity, of the scriptures. And so, there are all kinds of proofs all throughout the Bible. But I think that in many ways, too, what we also find is that when it comes to the scriptures, one of the greatest evidence that it is what it claims to be, which what does the Bible claim to be? It claims to be the inspired, inerrant Word of God. One of the greatest proofs that the Bible is what it claims to be is found in the prophecies, in the things that are foretold that have then come to fruition. In fact, that is one of the, if you ever want to know, if somebody claims to be a prophet of God, here is the one way you know if they aren't. Well, here's the one way you know they aren't, okay? If anything they ever say and they claim as a prophecy of God does not come to fruition exactly as they said it would, they're not a prophet of God. I mean, that's what we know. Okay, here's a good example. Think about this. Imagine July 19th, of 2019, I stood up here in front of you and I said that God told me to tell you that within 1 year, within 365 days, a freak windstorm would wipe this building out. Nothing left but the foundation, and it would never be rebuilt again. Okay? Now, standing here today, 504 days later, what is the one thing we know to be true? I'm not a prophet of God. Because that was my prediction. Okay, that I said that would happen, but obviously God did not, because if he did, it would have happened. So that we know that for a fact. Okay? And so the Bible is full of all kinds of prophecies which have then come to fruition exactly as they said they would. But nowhere, I think, is prophecy, does it play more of a pivotal and crucial role than in the prophecies about the Messiah, about Jesus. Okay, and we've been in this for 2 weeks. This is our third week. We have been doing before there was Christmas, and a lot of what we've dealt with has been prophecy about the Messiah, about the atonement, in different ways. And we're going to kind of today, our key verse, we're in Psalm chapter 2, verse 7. And if you want to go ahead and you can turn there, but one of the things to understand why it was so important, because have you ever wondered why, we looked at Jesus as the Messiah and there were all these prophecies about the Messiah that would be coming? Why were there all of those prophecies? We talked about it. It is so that the Jews would know who he was when he came. I mean, you think about it, we discussed this, the fact that Jesus came as the Messiah, but he was not the Messiah that they had been looking for. And so when that is the case, there needs to be proof. There needs to be evidence. And so God provided that. He's been providing that all along in all of these prophecies about the Messiah so that they would know. We looked just at a little bit of the fact that we knew the Messiah would be of the line of David, but that he would be David's Lord, and that is fulfilled in Jesus. We knew that he would be a priest in the order of Melchizedek, that he would be without beginning and he would be without end of days. And we know that Jesus fulfilled that prophecy as well. He's the only one that has, he's the only one that could. Okay? Now, in the same way, then we talked about the prophecies about the atonement, looking back in the back and towards the fact of the foundation of the atonement being set up, which goes back to Genesis and then rolls all the way through. We find it in the wilderness. We find it in the sacrificial system in which the Jews were taught what? They were taught that the blood of anything, that the life of anything is in the blood. They were taught that without the shedding of blood, there can be no atonement for sins. They were taught that the wages of sin is death. And so that was laid out, but every bit of that as well was a prophecy and a prediction that it was pointing to who? To the Messiah, to Jesus, to the one who would be the atonement, who made that atoning sacrifice. And so in the same way, we've had all of this going through. And so we looked a lot of Old Testament. This week we're in chapter 2, verse 7. And this is what it says. I want to go through here. Look, it says, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." Now that is a passage that could be, people could try to take it off and go in different directions. When you read it in the context of Psalm 2 in its entirety, there is no question about the fact that, number one, that is a prophecy concerning the Messiah. And as we find, it is a prophecy that can only be fulfilled in Jesus. In fact, there's Psalm chapter 2 actually has three very distinct prophecies. Number one, if you go about Jesus, Psalm chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, and if you read that, you'll find that it sounds kind of familiar. Okay, you probably heard it. You may have never heard Psalm 2 preached on, but you have heard that passage before. And you've heard it when somebody was preaching on the book of Acts and the birth of the early church. Okay, do you remember the believer's prayer? We've all heard the believer's prayer, when he says that then, enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness, right? We all know that part. Do you know how it started? It started with a quote of Psalms chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. That was how the believer's prayer started, saying, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. And what had happened, Peter and John were arrested. They were brought in. They're made to stand before the Sanhedrin. They're told that they are not allowed to preach, to teach, to talk in the name of Jesus anymore. They healed a beggar. And so like, nope, can't do it anymore. To which Peter and John, I love it, they say, yeah, that's not going to happen. And so the Sanhedrin can't figure out what in the world to do with them. So what do? They let them go. So they go home. They go back to their people. They gather. They tell them everything that happened. And then they offer up this prayer. And then after they've said that, they go on and they describe the nations, the peoples, the kings, the rulers as Herod, as Pontius Pilate, as the Gentiles, as the people of Israel, saying that they will do what? They will gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. And you read that, and I would challenge you, go back, and there's no way, people can have all kinds of, well, it could have been, and maybe we'll, you can't read Psalm chapter 2, you can't read Psalm 2 without seeing that it is describing Jesus. Plain and simple. Here is David, the psalmist, 1,000 years earlier, writing this about what would happen in Jesus' ministry. And then here it is being requoted by Peter and John and the rest of the followers. Why? Because they know exactly what it was. David was calling this 1,000 years ago. And it's being fulfilled in our midst. Which is why they were able to pray, so enable your servants to speak your word with great boldness. Verse 9 is another prophecy that of Jesus. And this kind of goes back to something we had talked about before. We read here that he says, you will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. And this visual is cited 3 times. We had talked about the Jews were looking for what in a Messiah? They wanted a conquering king. They needed somebody that would come and destroy their enemies. And what did they get instead? Instead of a conquering king riding on a mighty stallion, they got a peaceful king riding on a donkey. Okay? And the fact is, though, that as you read this, and this prophecy that we read here has not been fulfilled yet, but it is referenced 3 times. Do you know where? Book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 2, verse 27, chapter 12, verse 5, and chapter 19, verse 15. And like I said, this is something that, they wanted somebody to conquer their enemies, and instead they got a sacrifice. They got a peaceful king instead of a conquering king. And so I think one of the things to keep in mind, and maybe it's kind of where I get a little bit overwhelmed. We started singing, Even So Come. We get this image in our head of Jesus. See, and I think this is what the Jews were guilty of as well, is that they got this image in their head of what he should look like. And I think sometimes we read the scriptures and we get this image in our head of what we think he's like. I've got a painting. If you've ever been in my office, there's a painting that hangs on my wall. And it's entitled, I'll Rise Again. And it is it's a description, a depiction, of Revelation 19, verses 11 through 16. Where it says that Jesus will mount up, describes his horse, says that he will mount up, that the armies of the Lord, that the nations will be gathered behind him, that he will be wearing a robe that is dripped in blood. The hem of it is dipped in the blood of his enemies. You can't understand this enough. The mild Son of Man, when he returns, will return as King of Kings, Lord of Lords. He will return, I believe, with a vengeance that was only partially glimpsed at the cleansing of the temple. No matter what we want to make him look like, no matter how we want to paint our pictures, no matter we want to, these pretty pictures we get in our head, please understand that when Jesus returns, he is not someone to be trifled with, and he is not someone to be taken for granted. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. Every knee will bow on earth, under the earth, in the earth. Every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And we sing that song, we sing it so many times, and yes, and it brings a smile to my face. But do you understand that that same moment is going to bring such sheer dread to a large portion of our planet? To realize he has returned. That is the one part of this prophecy that has not been fulfilled, but rest assured, it will be. And we know it will be because every other prophecy has been fulfilled. Then we come to ours, kind of nestled in between here. Psalm chapter 2, verse 7 says, "You are my son. Today I have become your father." And this is a direct prophecy about Jesus. Chances are, as you read it before, you probably heard it in other passages. That is actually cited and quoted. It is twice each. It is quoted in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay, 2 different times. All 3 of them, it is quoted at the baptism of Jesus. And all 3 of them, it is quoted or cited at the transfiguration of Jesus. But here's where the importance comes in. This is what makes this even bigger. Those words are spoken by God, an audible voice from heaven. "This is my son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. This is my son whom I love. Listen to what he tells you." I mean, I'm sorry. As far as I'm concerned, that is game, set, match. We're done. If God says it, it is. Okay? And so sometimes we wonder, and that's like I said, those are the times when it is cited there in the New Testament, the 2 out of the 3, it's quoted by God. And once again, here we go back to David writing this in 1055 BC. And here's God proclaiming it 1,000 years later. But, have you ever wondered why there's so many prophecies about who the Messiah would be? Wouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't we know? Well, see, God's smarter than all of us. And so he knew that there would always be people that is going to say, that's not good enough. No. There was always going to be people that go, yeah, but, you could interpret that a little different way. Or, well, if you change this word, then that isn't really, there's always going to be people like that. There's always going to be people that are going to try to kind of, muddy the waters. They're going to try to kind of discount fulfillment of prophecies. Say, well, they were just making it look like he fulfilled that so that they could claim he was the Messiah. Do you know how many prophecies there are? Major prophecies concerning the Messiah and Jesus as the Son of God. Would it surprise you to know that there are more than 20? Would it surprise you to know that there's more than 40? Would it surprise you to know there's more than 50? Would it surprise you to know that there's more than 60 prophecies pertaining to Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God? Woo! That's an attention getter. Okay? And the thing, why are there so many? And I think it is. I think there's a couple of reasons. Number one, because God knew that there would always be doubters, that there would always be haters, that there would always be people that would say, nah, that's not the case. But there's another one too. And I think it is in the fact that God wants you and I to have every bit of evidence needed to place all of our trust in Jesus. Because the fact is that in difficult times, You know, in all of the in all of the messages, the warped messages that we get, the fact is that our fear can begin to set in. Doubt can begin to set in. And I think God wanted to make sure that we had all of the information that we needed, because overwhelming evidence is the antidote to the poison of doubt. And that's what enables us to get through the difficult times when we don't see light at the end of the tunnel. To know that, you know what? But God said, and He always did, and He will again. And so that's why, so that when we place our trust in Jesus, we know who Jesus is with no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no questions whatsoever. But I think the other reason is that, like we talked about, of accepting Jesus for who He is, the Jews had all the information, right? If all of this Old Testament stuff, the Jews knew all of this, correct? So how did they miss Him? You ever wondered? They looked at the evidence subjectively instead of objectively. And here's what I called the other day, because I was kind of asking about this, so I called Josh Olson and I asked him, I said, okay, so tell me a little bit. I said, I want to pick your brain on investigations, you know, when officers and detectives, they walk into a room, what starts the investigation? And they take in all of the information, okay? And they try to get everything they can, and then depending on the direction that takes them, they start to go in that direction. But he says you cannot ignore anything. You have to look at all of the evidence. And I think this is where, you know, the Jews looked at it subjectively, because they had the evidence and they tried to fit it into their mold of what He should look like. So they followed it one direction. I mean, it's like, you know, if you were to say that it was Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick, and there's all kinds of evidence that points that way. But there's this one little piece of information that looks like maybe it was Mrs. Peacock in the dining room with the poison and she just framed Colonel Mustard. You have to follow the evidence. See, subjectively says, no, it was Colonel Mustard. We know. Now we just got to prove it. Well, see, to look at it objectively says that I'm going to take in all the information, and no matter where it leads me, that is what I will follow. And that's what they did not do. And so God gave us all of this information so that we could look at it. And no matter which way it was trying to point us, anything else, it's not going to take us in the wrong direction. And you look at these prophecies, and we're just going to look at a few of them. But I think one of the things that is so amazing about the prophecies about Jesus is, number one, they are so varied. Yeah, they're all over the place, but also there are so many of them that could not have been fulfilled by human effort alone. Okay? They couldn't have. And in fact, that's the first one we're going to look at. Micah chapter 5, verse 2 says what? It says that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. Who gets to pick where they're born? Nobody. And so, I mean, you got right off the bat. Nope, we're going to put one that you have no control over. And so we know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. But the interesting thing is, did his mom and dad, did they live in Bethlehem? No. How cool is that? God's working things all over. Malachi 3:1 tells us what? It says that He will be preceded by a forerunner, someone who will prepare the way. We know John the Baptist. John the Baptist was exactly that. And he came beforehand. That is fulfilled, because it was John the Baptist who pointed and said, look, here comes the Lamb of God which takes away the sin of the world. Zechariah 9:9. We quoted every Palm Sunday. Every Palm Sunday, what does it say? It reminds us that Israel's king will enter into the city riding on a donkey, on a colt, on the foal of a donkey. Once again, the Jews, they kind of, we ignored this one because we want a conquering king on a big white stallion. Not a mild king, a peaceful king riding in on a donkey. We quote this every year, Palm Sunday. Zechariah 13:6 tells us that the Messiah will be betrayed by a friend, and that it will result in wounds upon his body. Some translations take it and actually say that the wounds were on his hands. They translated as that way. So, excuse me. Zechariah 11, verse 12 and 13 tells us that he would be sold for 30 pieces of silver, and that it would be given to a potter. What do we know? Judas betrayed Jesus for how much? 30 pieces of silver. And then what did he do? When the guilt overwhelmed him, he took it in and he threw it back into the temple. And they said, no, this is blood money. Can't do it. What should we do with it? We're going to buy a potter's field with the blood money. But coincidence. Isaiah 53:7 prophesied that the Messiah would stand silent before his oppressors. What we know is that all throughout, Jesus never defended himself. In fact, it just made Herod so stinking mad because he wanted to talk to him and he wouldn't. Psalm 22:16 describes the Messiah's death by crucifixion, including being surrounded by evil men and piercing his hands and his feet. That's a description of Golgotha, of Calvary. Surrounded by evil men who wanted him dead, pierced his hands and his feet. It even goes on, then verse 18 is another one. It says that they will do what? They will cast lots for his clothing. Go back and read on Calvary. What do they say? That they cast lots. They divided his clothes. They cast lots for the linen undergarment. I mean, the fact is that all throughout, and every one of these is Old Testament. All of these were written 1,000 years before Jesus came onto the scene in human form, yet they're all fulfilled. How? Exactly. Not close. I mean, we're not talking best 2 out of 3. We're not talking, I love it when people try to say that Nostradamus has predicted all of this stuff. I don't know where they get it. I sat down and read like 6 of his quatrains. They're supposed to predict things, and I'm like, and that's supposed to have told us that 9/11. Yeah, no. There's no way. Okay, but what we find in the biblical prophecies, they are fulfilled exactly as they are foretold, and they are fulfilled in great detail. But now I want to, if you do me a favor, if you get lost in all the numbers and you tuned out and you're taking a nap, I'm tell you right now, come on back in. Okay? Please. I want to give you an idea. If you get a bulletin, turn it over on the back of the sermon notes. I want you to just get a grip of what we're talking about here. To be struck by lightning is rare enough, okay? For one of you to be struck by lightning twice in your lifetime, the odds are 1 in 9 million. So I think, we ought to be okay. Now, if you're going to go out, we talked about the Powerball lottery, so if you're planning to go out and buy tickets this week, I just want to let you know, you have better odds of being struck by lightning twice in your lifetime than you do winning the lottery. Okay? 1 in 292,201,338. Okay, that's your odds of winning the Powerball lottery. Okay, so, we look at these and we're okay. We just read 8 prophecies about Jesus. Okay. Here are the hold on a second. Here are the odds of one person throughout history, one human being throughout human history fulfilling 8 prophecies. Okay? They are 1 in 100 quadrillion. Just to give you an idea, that is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. So that's 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 17 times. There's 17 zeros after the 1. That is 1 in 100 quadrillion. Okay, it makes the lottery look like a shoe-in. Doesn't it? And that's just 8. Remember, I told you that there's more than 60 prophecies concerning the Messiah. Now, some of them will be on. Some of them have not been fulfilled yet because they are in Revelation. They are set to come. They will be fulfilled. And the reason I can say that I know they will be fulfilled is because of everyone that has been fulfilled exactly. Not one has been missed. Not one's been, ooh, that was close, but no cigar. Everyone has been fulfilled exactly as God said it would in one person, Jesus Christ. Now, if fulfilling 8 of these prophecies is odds of 1 in 100 quadrillion, and I want to get in it just so you have a little bit of a visual here, because I think everybody, you throw out numbers like that and it's like, I have no clue what that is. Okay. Imagine for a second, some of you may have heard this before, silver dollar, okay? Imagine this silver dollar is painted red. Then we are to cover the entire state, an area the size of the state of Texas, okay, from ocean to border to border to border, with unpainted silver dollars 2 feet deep, okay? Entire state. Then you throw this one in there, mix it all thoroughly, and then I'm going to blindfold one of you. And I'm going to tell you can walk as long as you want, wherever you want, does not matter. But as you are blindfolded, you need to reach down, pick up one silver dollar. The chances of you pulling out the one red one that we dropped in is 1 in 100 quadrillion. That's only 8 of them. I don't know how much further if we get any bigger numbers, okay? But there was a gentleman that did a study of fulfilling just 48. Okay? We didn't have enough room for zeros. 48 prophecies fulfilled by one person is 1 in 10 to the 157th power. That is 1 with 157 zeros following it. Okay? That's fulfilling 48. And I don't know, you're like, you like to tell them stories and big numbers and here's the deal. Okay? There will always be people who are going to try and discount the prophecies of Jesus. There's always going to be people who will be skeptics. There's always going to be people that are going to say, yeah, I don't think so, but no, and maybe not. And then maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're a skeptic, okay? If you are here today and you're a skeptic, you're like, I don't know. I can't know for sure. I'm just going to say this. With those odds, the conversation that you need to have with yourself is you need to provide an explanation for how in the world one man fulfilled over 60 prophecies, and you still don't call him the Savior. You still don't say that he is who he says he is, the Messiah and the Son of God. That's what you have to wrestle with. Maybe you are a believer. And here's why I think that this is so important. I know right now we are going through what seems many people to be dark, dark times. There are a lot of people, they are depressed, they are lonely. There's a lot of people that are struggling right now. They're wondering what in the world, not next year holds. They're wondering what next week holds. They're wondering what tomorrow holds. And the thing is that what I'm here to tell you, do you understand? The same God who put all of this together so that you would know that Jesus is the Son of God, so that you would know that Jesus is the promised Messiah, is the same God who holds your future. He's the same God who holds you. Do we really have anything to fear when He's on our side? Do we have anything to be worried about when He's in control? No. The reason we have all the prophecies, the reason we have all the fulfillment, is because it is that overwhelming evidence, is the antidote to the poison of doubt and fear that this world tries to feed us. to trust and believe that He is who He says He is, that He did what He said He would do. And one day, He will do what He promised, which is return to take us home. I'm going to ask you to stand.